Krista?
Present.
My name is Dan McGuire. I'm the council chair. Present. With us tonight are many of the department heads and our town manager, Mike Foley. I believe Councilor Gass will be here as we go along. I would just like to start by saying, having reviewed what I received for tonight's meeting packet, that clearly some massive improvements have been made to our budgeting process in a very short period of time. And I know to varying degrees, all of you had something to do with that. So thanks from me and the council for all the effort that's obviously gone into it this far. And I'll turn it over to Town Manager Foley.
Awesome, thank you. We'll start with just a brief presentation that I have, a message that I had provided to you guys as part of the budget, and then I have some slides to present as well. So the Town of Gray's administration is pleased to present the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for your review and consideration. As this is the second budget prepared by our team and myself for the town, we now possess a significantly enhanced comprehension of town operations and a more thorough understanding of the town's financial standing, though substantial work remains to be undertaken. With that, we have continued with achievable goals similar to last year. These goals encompass financial accountability and sustainability, as well as laying a foundation for the future. In response to these goals, rising operating expenses for municipal operations and the growth of the community, along with the need to stabilize operating revenue from major non-property tax sources such as revenue sharing and motor vehicle excise taxes, the proposed municipal budget is based on a current services scenario with minimal increases to support these critical goals. Given the limited availability of new programs and new personnel for the upcoming fiscal year, we believe this responsible and responsive budget will be well received by the community. We remain fully aware of the economic difficulties faced by many of our residents, homeowners, and businesses. Many businesses are still grappling with the long-term consequences of the pandemic and the economic challenges that resulted. These challenges encompass a significantly altered labor force, highly disrupted supply chains, substantial production disruptions, and an uncertain economic environment. While individuals and families continue to grapple with escalating prices for housing, food, fuel, energy, and other essential products and services, we are confident that this proposed budget will not impose an undue financial burden on the community. For your reference, an overview of the enclosed net taxes to be raised summary sheet is provided below in the budget book, and I provided a recent updated one to the town council today that was updated moments before the meeting, and I'll go over in more detail in the presentations. Specifically regarding the municipal budget, the proposed municipal budget includes 3 new positions, 2 of which will commence halfway through the fiscal year. 1 position will be funded through part-time resources. Additionally, 2 existing positions have been eliminated. The budget incorporates average wage and market adjustments, along with the implementation of a wage scale to retain our current workforce. This strategy recognizes years of experience and facilitates recruitment for vacant and future positions in an unprecedented labor market. In total, the budget allocates approximately $500,000 in wages and benefits above current funding levels, partially offset by approximately $200,000 in reductions. Future policy changes will further support our workforce as well. Other cost increases include health insurance, which we're estimating a 10% increase. Utilities, we're seeing an average of 3 to 10% increases in. Workers' compensation insurance, we're seeing a 39% increase in. General liability insurance, we're seeing approximately a 6% increase, and trash disposal costs are seeing also a 6% increase. While the town's primary revenue sources were more accurately reflected in fiscal year 25, these have begun to stabilize in fiscal year 26. For instance, $2.65 million in excise tax, approximately $1 million in revenue sharing, $363,000 in administrative fees, $400,000 in public safety fees, and $440,000 in general fund interest, resulting in modest increases over current year revenue levels in these and other accounts. To further support a balanced municipal budget, the use of fund balance continues, but has been reduced by approximately $250,000, resulting in a total of $750,000, which we intend to continue reducing in the future. To further support a balanced municipal budget, this budget proposes borrowing to refinance higher interest, long-term borrowing, and fund current capital needs at more favorable financing rates and terms. This will result in a decrease this year and a minimal increase in debt service for next fiscal year, and help stabilize the account as we continue to reconcile our accounts and set aside additional funds in the capital reserve, such as $1 million that I'll be proposing. And we anticipate that borrowing will be limited to major capital investments in the future. Additionally, we propose restoring the appropriation of funds for land acquisition of $500,000, as the town has done in previous years. Cumulatively, municipal expenditures have increased by 2.94%, approximately $394,000 over the current fiscal year budget, while total municipal revenues have risen by 1.71%, approximately $124,000. This results in an approximate 0.54% or $34,826 net decrease in the required property taxes to finance the municipal portion of the budget. However, considering Gray's current assessed valuation of approximately $2.2 billion, this translates into a reasonable reduction in the municipal portion of the property tax rate by 4 cents, representing a decrease of 1.35% below the current year's tax rate. The school portion of the budget remains undefined and has not yet been presented to the MSAD 15 school board. The estimated calculations we provided indicate an anticipated increase in Gray's share of the budget. And I've got new figures I've just updated today. An increase of Gray's share by 10.68%, or $1,376,000, compared to current year funding levels. This translates to a corresponding increase in the school portion of the property tax rate by updated number of 58 cents, resulting in a 9.78% rise over the current year. It is important to note that these are estimates provided by the school department of a status quo budget scenario, and they have informed me they have a lot of work to do in the weeks ahead as they review their budget. But these are increases similar to those we experienced in fiscal year 25. We anticipate receiving more comprehensive data when the initial draft of their budget is presented to the school board, which I believe is supposed to be tomorrow evening. And they'll be providing an update to the town council as part of our April 1st town council meeting. As the municipal government has no say in the school budget, we encourage the community to actively participate in the school district's budget process as well. Community involvement is crucial to ensure that the budget reflects the needs and priorities of our residents. And for county tax needs, the fiscal year 26 budget also includes a 6.13% or $59,862 increase in the town's Cumberland County tax bill. This increase encompasses the additional payment, year 3 of 5, attributable to a shift in the county's fiscal year. Wages, benefits, and inflation in pivotal sectors such as utilities and standard goods are also contributed to this rise, as reported by county management, who will be joining us at our town council workshop on March 18th. In summary, the combined estimated budget proposal for fiscal year 26 projects a property tax requirements totaling $22,679,139, representing an approximate 6.73% or $1,429,898 over the current fiscal year. Based on the town's current assessed valuation growth, this yields a projected property tax rate of $10.27 per $1,000 of assessed valuation, resulting in a 57-cent or 5.87% increase in the mill rate. And these are updated figures from my message for those who are following along. We believe this tax adjustment is a prudent measure to support the community's well-being. Investing in municipal services and education is crucial for fostering economic growth within our community. To achieve our desired economic objectives, sustainable new investments are necessary. Simultaneously, it is imperative to maintain a stable property tax rate that residents and businesses can reasonably manage. It is important to note that the school department, again, operates independently from the municipal government. We believe this proposed plan will help establish sound fiscal policies to address the community's current and future needs, particularly within the municipal budget. We acknowledge that residents and businesses may not be able to sustain unmanageable increases in the property tax rate annually, as they have experienced in recent years, particularly those negatively impacted by the revaluation. We sincerely hope that this year's proposed tax adjustment is a positive development for the community. We greatly appreciate your support and trust in our ability to effectively balance the community's financial obligations with its available resources. Town Council workshops pertinent to the upcoming budget review will commence today, and both prior to and following the regular Town Council meeting scheduled for Tuesday, March 18th. And these sessions will be held here in the Town Council chambers at the Henry Pennell Municipal Complex beginning at 5:30 on both nights. The public is cordially invited to attend these workshops in person, view them online, or participate remotely via Microsoft Teams. This will provide ample opportunities for residents and businesses to gain insights into the budget review process. This year, we are excited to announce the implementation of ClearGov, a comprehensive budget management solution to streamline our budgeting process. ClearGov's user-friendly platform will enhance our ability to create, manage, and present our annual budget with greater efficiency and transparency. While we are not able to utilize all of ClearGov's tools this year, we are committed to enhancing our usage in the years to come. By leveraging ClearGov's powerful tools, we aim to improve collaboration among departments, visualize the impact of budget decisions through interactive dashboards, and foster greater civic engagement by making our financial data more accessible to the community. This transition marks a significant step towards a more transparent and efficient budgeting process, ensuring that we can better serve our residents and stakeholders. The fiscal year 26 budget warrants will be presented at a public hearing during the Town Council meeting on Tuesday, April 1st at 7 p.m. A draft was also included in the budget preparation, the budget book. And subsequently, the Town Council will deliberate and approve the warrants on Tuesday, April 15th at 7 p.m. A referendum town meeting will be convened on Tuesday, June 10th to vote on the warrants. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and will include other municipal and school positions up for election. Additionally, a town meeting will be held on Thursday, May 22nd at Great New Gloucester High School to discuss the school department budget warrants. A validation referendum will be held on the school department portion of the budget on June 10th as well. We eagerly anticipate collaborating with the Town Council, members of the school department, and our esteemed residents and businesses to present a well-balanced budget proposal that serves the community's best interests. And with that, I'll turn over to some slides that I have to quickly go through as we get ready to advance to the individual departments. So I did want to just revisit the budget challenges that I talked about at our February budget public hearing that we referenced. The state budget, we still are uncertain about the current state budget we're operating in, which hasn't yet been adopted, and the future state biennial budget. We do have estimates associated with those, mainly in reference to municipal revenue sharing and general assistance reimbursement, but there could be things that happen within those budgets that affect the municipal budget in the future. Also, we're concerned about, or some of the challenges are federal tariffs and funding. For federal funding, we continue to monitor those items, and they may or may not impact. The county budget is reporting the 6 to 8% increase that we've settled closer to the 6 side. Law enforcement staffing, which we had a presentation about at our town council workshop last week. Continued cost increases in utilities, salt and sand and fuel. And then also Revaluation is a budget challenge that we wanted to help navigate. And then we also wanted to have wages that recognize years of experience to promote longevity and retention. And then we had in the current fiscal year budget some half-year positions, and we have improvements in wages in the fire department, as well as some improvements in staffing for the transfer station going forward. And then capital expenses that are upcoming, such as truck replacement, fuel tanks, and facilities improvements. Some opportunities we had is the Consolidated Code Enforcement and Planning Department, which will present that proposed combined budget this evening. We had a number of one-time expenses from fiscal year 25. And we, as I mentioned in my message, we continue to see steady community growth in valuation, as well as the potential bond refinancing, and the elimination of the planning director and town engineer and project manager positions, as well as the opportunity to continue partnerships with North Yarmouth and New Gloucester. Some goals that were established outside of the core goals to continue to support the town council priorities, which I've outlined. We had tried to do minimal municipal tax increase. We're working to catch up on audits during fiscal year 26. Promote community growth through business retention and expansion, complete the comprehensive plan zoning, as well as improve property tax collections for the future. And then we built upon from last year the financial accountability and sustainability with the introduction of ClearGov and some other budgetary factors, as well as laying the foundation for the future. So some of the goals and changes that we experienced from last year is we've had revised revenues based on actuals. So we continue to build upon that last year. In previous years, the town had very conservatively estimated figures such as motor vehicle excise tax, and that resulted in significant budget surpluses at the end of the fiscal year, which gave us the fund balance projections that we have going forward. And so we've actually had those reflect actuals, which helped us to generate non-property tax revenues. And then again, to reiterate, the Consolidated Code Enforcement and Planning Department. We've also revised the Economic Development Department that continues to be funded through tax increment financing. We've improved staffing in recycling and solid waste, or also referred to as the transfer station, and we're proposing a bond refinancing and a new borrowing combined with that bond refinancing for some public works projects. The challenges that, again, we encountered were law enforcement, which as part of this proposed budget, and we'll review the law enforcement section of the budget this evening, we've proposed a new deputy to start in January 1st, and the budget includes the cost for that associated new deputy and equipment. And then we have an opportunity, we're seeing challenges with recycling and solid waste with increased costs, increased flow, the need for more staffing, but we have an opportunity with the extended producer responsibility program, which I briefly mentioned to the town council last year, where the town will be able to receive a revenue from the state program of approximately 25 to 40% of our recycling operation. So we'll have to calculate what exactly those costs are, that is paid for by producers in order to help with the processing costs associated with recycling. So an example, a business like Amazon will pay a small tax on every box that they produce into the state fund, and the state will then disperse those funds across municipalities to use to help process the recycling of said boxes. So in the fund balance, we're also proposing, again, like I mentioned in my message, of using $750,000 and stepping it down into fiscal year 28, which I outlined in the budget book. So I wanted to just quickly go over the fund balance as that's like the big picture of where we live. One of the challenges with a fund balance is we don't yet have a fiscal year 23 audit. We do have a draft figure for fund balance as part of that audit. We're working with our auditors. Thankfully, they've let us know that it's likely that the town, despite some of the challenges we've had, will receive a clean opinion on our audit, which is good news. And they hopefully will be ready maybe sometime next month to present the audit to the town council. And then all the work to figure our systems out and figure out how we operate in fiscal year 23, they'll be able to do fiscal year 24 much faster to be ready for us to audit fiscal year 25 on schedule. So we are looking forward. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't completely know it yet. But I did want to just quickly talk about fund balance. The town has a policy where the town must retain between 25%, or it's referred to as 3/12 or 2/12, which is approximately 25% and 17% of fund balance in order to help offset the municipal budget, or not offset the municipal budget, but have on hand to manage our finances here with the town. So that based on the fiscal year 25 tax commitment, proposed tax commitment, which was $21,249,241, we need to have a maximum of $5,312,310, or a minimum of $3,527,374. I put fiscal year 26 estimated one on there. We don't need to talk about that, but that was referenced the previous figures that I had with, so that will be updated in the future. But so currently, based on the draft fiscal year 23 audit, we have $7,938,583 in fund balance, which is in excess of the policy by about $1.6 million. So we have more on hand. And for lack of a better way to describe it, essentially these budget years that we've grown this fund balance, the residents and property owners have been overtaxed in that situation. So we're trying to stabilize that, to make sure everybody's properly taxed and utilize those resources for one-time opportunities rather than ongoing regular expenses. So in fiscal year 24, we have, as part of our draft budget, our draft financial statements, we're estimating a contribution to fund balance of $1,636,042. That is a cause of the conservative budgeting that I referenced that we corrected in fiscal year 25, conservative revenue budgeting, and the improved interest, bank interest that we received when I came on board and recognized that the town wasn't properly receiving interest from the bank. So we were able to grow revenues while also under expending things to result in that increase. And then in fiscal year 25, we're proposing a $1 million use of fund balance to offset the property tax rate. We're fairly confident that we won't utilize that whole figure, but we want to show that in the reconciliation. And then for fiscal year 26, we're proposing transfers of $2,250,000, of which only $750,000 of it is to actually support the budget. The remaining transfers, as I outlined, was $1 million in my message, was $1 million to put into the capital reserve fund and $500,000 to put into the land acquisition fund, which the town had established a number of years ago. So that shows a remaining, after fiscal year 26, a remaining fund balance of $6,324,625, which is still over the 25% requirement. And in the sheet that I provided in the budget book, you'll see I forecasted the step down usage of the budget fund balance to reflect that even after fiscal year 28, we will still be slightly over that if all things happen exactly as we forecasted, but we think they'll result more positively than we forecasted. So I just wanted to have everybody see that big picture as we dig into the budget presentation as a whole. Now I wanted to just show the numbers that I kind of ran through so people can see. So in fiscal year 25, the municipal budget was approximately $13.4 million. The municipal budget that we're proposing is approximately $3.8 million, which is roughly a $400,000 increase over last year, which is a 2.94% increase in spending. The TIF figure is an estimate based on the TIFs that we have here in the community and any new value that may be created as part of those TIFs would remain in that figure. And then I do have the updated school figures here, which show an increase in Gray's share from approximately 12.9 million to approximately 14.2, almost 14.3 million, which is an increase of about almost 1.4 million or 10.68%. The county budget last year was approximately $976,000, and it increases to $1,035,000, which is about a $60,000 increase over last year, or 6.13%. So the total spending based on these estimated figures goes from about 28.2 million to about 30.1 million, which is about a almost 1.9 million increase in spending, which is 6.59%. And I just want to continue to underscore that this includes the school department budget, with a budget that is just a rough figure of status quo budget for everything that the school department shared. So they have indicated that it's likely to go down, but that's the lion's share of the increase in these spending proposals. So then the revenues, the non-property tax revenues, which we have, that I've kind of outlined some of them in my budget message. Those last year were about $7,265,964. And we're proposing those to go at a slight increase of $7,390,187, or an increase of about $124,000, which is a 1.71% increase in the revenues. And that's to pretty much stabilize our revenues from year to year. And then given that with the estimated tax needs, it results in the estimated tax needs from the municipal budget are about 6.4 million, $6,441,411, and for fiscal year 25, and for fiscal year 26, it's about $406,585, which is a reduction of $34,826, or a 0.54% decrease in the municipal estimated tax needs. TIF is about a 3% increase, which is pretty much the same figure that I outlined earlier in TIF. For school, it's estimated again about a $1.4 million increase, which is about 10.68%, the same figures I referenced earlier, and the county, which is about 60,000 more than last year, or 6.13%. And the reason the municipal is reduced from the actual proposed expenditures is that it's minus the non-property tax revenues that we can use to offset that municipal budget. With that, the total increase in estimated tax needs goes from about 21.2 million to about 22.7 million, or an increase of $1,429,897, or 6.73%. And that translates into a tax rate, which in fiscal year 25, the municipal tax rate was $2.94 following the revaluation. And fiscal year 26, as part of this budget proposal, the municipal tax rate will be $2.90, or a reduction in 4 cents, or 1.4%. The TIF share will be 43 cents in fiscal year 25, and it goes to 44 cents in fiscal year 26. Again, an estimate on those values, an increase of 1 cent, or 2.2%. And the school portion of the tax rate goes from $5.88 to $6.46, or a 58-cent increase, which translates into about a 9.8% increase in the school portion of the tax rate. And the county goes from 45 cents to 47 cents, or an increase of 2 cents, or 5.5%, with a total estimated tax rate going from $9.70 to $10.27, or a 57-cent increase, which translates to a 5.87% increase. The average home in the town of Gray is assessed at about $476,000. So in fiscal year 25, they were paying a property tax bill of $4,617.20. And this new proposed tax rates would translate to a tax bill of $4,887.79, or $271.01 increase, which also equals the 5.87%. So the average increase based on the numbers, if they were all to remain the same, would be $271 to the average property owner in gray. So just a reminder, the budget review schedule, we had a public input session on February 4th. The budget was delivered to the town council and the public on last Thursday on March 6th. We have the budget review workshops today and on March 18th. And we have a town council meeting on April 1st where we will hear an update on the MSAD 15 budget, and we'll have a public hearing on the draft budget warrants. And then on April 15th, we'll have approval of the annual budget warrants from by the town council, which will then be transposed into the referendum town meeting on June 10th, which is election day. So before we go into department specific budgets, does anyone from the town council have any questions on the general overview of the budget?
I have a quick question on the tax rate. Are you assuming no valuation growth with that?
No, that assumes, as based on the sheet, the updated sheet I gave you, it assumes an $18 million valuation growth, which is 0.82%. And that's a very conservative estimate by our assessing staff, that as they get personal property tax things in, and as they finalize improvements to properties that people make or new houses that are built, they'll have a more accurate figure when they go to set the tax rate, which likely any difference in that will be put into the overlay, which is typically what is done when there's overages and what the tax rate is set. Obviously, if there's twice the valuation, then when the assessor sets the tax rate, they're not allowed to have that much fluidity in the tax rate, so they'll set it will actually be lower than what we've estimated. But that's forecasting an estimated 18 million in new valuation.
Krista.
Just speaking of the overlay, I noticed last year we budgeted for approximately $300,000 for an overlay, which is a reduction in what we've done in years past. I'm noticing this year we've budgeted $0 for that. So I'm just curious what the rationale is around that.
So 300,000, I think, is actually a higher number than you guys have done in the past, because the law only allows there to be a certain number, and that number was higher because of the revaluation. So when the assessor went to set the tax rate, knowing that there was potential for abatements and things of that nature, which are taken out of that figure when the abatements take place by the assessor throughout the year. And so we budgeted 0, knowing that the growth in assessed value is actually conservative, so that any growth over 18 million will likely go into the overlay.
Okay. Have we had a lot of instances where we've needed to forgive or reduce people's property taxes coming out of the revaluation? Because I know the overlay is typically used to
we didn't have as many as we thought.
Okay.
So that the overlay figure being reduced, it helps us with the annual budget process as well, and why we're able to forecast a reduction in the net need for taxes.
Okay.
Anything else?
I have other things, but
No, go ahead. Yep.
Could you expand a little bit on the 3 new positions you're proposing? Because there was one instance where you mentioned 3 new positions in the budget book, and then in another instance it said there was just 1 full-time position. So I was just curious what.
Yeah, there's truly 1 full-time. Would it be okay if I explain those when we get to those department-specific budgets?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I can explain more detail on those when we get to those department-specific budgets.
And then could you also just elaborate what you're doing with this wage scale, what that looks like, and how it works?
Yeah. So essentially, we have ranges of pay for specific positions, and then it recognizes the range of pay recognizes years of experience in that role. So it's basically from 1 to 30 years of experience can be reflected on that scale at different rates. So one of the examples I gave you last time was a public works operator. All the public works operators were getting the same rate. It was $25 an hour, whether they had 30 years of experience or 0 years of experience. And so now that will adjust to help retain those employees. They'll be recognized for their years of experience. So this is, I don't have the exact figure, but say that the $25 person will go to be $27 or $28 to better reflect. All of these are also within market conditions for these types of positions. And so we'll be able to primarily retain the people we have, because they won't say, hey, I can go to Wyndham, who's paying, they're paying people with 20 years of experience X. And you don't pay me for you don't recognize any of my experience. And so that's essentially what it does. So we have a number of levels with hourly and salary employees as part of that scale. And then we place people on that scale based on their years of experience.
Okay.
Are
our cost of living adjustments baked into that figure, or is it separate?
They are for this year.
Okay.
Now that we'll have a scale, hopefully next year we'll be able to just take our scale and apply a COLA. And it'll be my goal to apply a COLA based on the CPI. And that way we have a figure that we can use on, and that's the consumer price index increase.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That was all I had for
Following
now.
up on that, I'd be curious to see the analysis as to what communities, for the different jobs that you used to arrive at those numbers. And then separately, in your presentation, you talk about restoring the funds for land acquisition. What do you mean by restoring?
So in the fiscal year 24 budget, you guys had proposed to put $410,000 into that. And I had heard some feedback over time that there was a desire to continue that in the future. And so I saw the opportunity that the fund balance presented itself that we could continue to do that. Also, there's a desire amongst our open space committee to acquire open space for the town. And so in order to be able to do that, we need to have some sort of budget for it. So we have all those funds in years past. I think started in fiscal year 20, there was maybe 40 or 50 set aside in some years, and then it jumped up big to the 410. And then, we were proposing to capitalize it at the 500 without it being an impact to the property tax rate. And then hopefully going forward, we can budget it as part of our capital budget to include a much smaller figure every year.
And so I asked because I just wanted to clarify that we're not putting $500,000 into that fund this year.
It would be, that's the proposal as part of the fiscal year 26 budget. This year is not putting anything into it. The current fiscal year we're in.
Right. Yes, but my point is we're adding to the existing total. We're not putting $500,000 in fiscal year 26, correct?
That's the proposal.
Right.
To put
think
500,000 in.
No, he wants to put 500.
To transfer
In
from fund
addition-
balance $500,000
on
in
top of
addition
the
to what already
410.
exists.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, I think, around 600 did we settle? We don't have the exact figure because we're still trying to reconcile. There's maybe between 500,000 and 600,000 that was set aside over previous years.
Okay.
And we're reconciling that as part of our auditing processes. And then we will add that to it. So we'll have a fund of, approximately $1 million for land acquisition.
Okay. I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah. But if we don't transfer that, it would just sit in our fund balance being unused, essentially. Yeah.
And so for the analysis of the wages that you mentioned,
Yes.
I did most of that work myself, and I researched by going to job postings and things of that nature. So I didn't conduct like a documented analysis. So I would look to see what the range is for, the public works operators in Wyndham, and I'd looked at job postings on the Maine municipal website and things of that nature. So I don't have like a documented analysis of that available. It was more researching to make sure we weren't outside of that. Like if public works ranges were, 20 to 30, we weren't at 35. So we tried to be within the ranges to continue to be competitive in the workforce.
I guess in my mind, those ranges depend on which communities you decide to compare yourself against. And so in the past, what we've tried to do is come up with a basket of communities that we do compare ourselves with. so that there's some consistency over time, and so that that's kind of a known product. I think I'll still lobby for us to as time goes on, to try and get to a point where we do, because some of that, in my mind anyways, is based on where we draw people from, and then who we're actually competing with and who we can compete against. We're never going to be able to compete with Portland or South Portland or maybe even Westbrook to some extent, dollar for dollar. But I think it's important to know, where those numbers come from. So in the future, I'd like to see us do that anyways. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple
Mike?
questions. You said that you are not using the conservative approach like we had in the past for the, for
The revenues.
Yeah, for the revenue. What's your reason behind that? Because to me, I'd much rather under promise and over deliver, and this is a pretty tight. Mike, it's a great budget. All right, you've done well, and your whole team's done well. But I'm concerned it's too tight. So what would be your reason why you wouldn't go with a conservative approach?
So let me rephrase. Our estimates are conservative. The estimates prior were extremely conservative. So for instance, motor vehicle excise tax was budgeted at like $700,000, and we're on track to, I don't have the.
We brought in like $1 million more almost.
Yeah, we brought in like $1 million more.
More.
So more.
Okay.
So it was like, as part of last year's budget, in order to justify increasing those numbers, I conducted an analysis where I showed the history of what actually, and this was happening, I think probably in fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, fiscal year 24, where every year they stuck with the like $700,000 figure. And so those were extreme conservative figures. So at the end of the year, the budget ended with a massive contribution to fund balance.
Okay.
So I would say these estimates are conservative. If you'll see in when fiscal year 25 finishes, that my estimates for fiscal year 25, most of them are going to be blown out of the water. So we're gonna be better than what we estimated on revenues, and we're always better than what we estimate on expenses too. We always try to, if things we can survive without or don't need, we make those decisions throughout the budget year, and that's reflected that's reflected positively in prior budgets as well, where they underspent the budget by $1 million or something like that. That's not uncommon, but we want to also make sure we're budgeting what's absolutely necessary. A lot of times we have vacant positions and things like that's what contributes to that. If we get a fully staffed organization, then we'll be able to contribute to those things.
Anyone else? Just another quick one, Mike. On packet page 18,
Yep.
the expenditure summary, I'm asking because I just want someone who's looking at this to be clear. You see that in 24, 25, and 26, there's expenses budgeted, as opposed to looking at 24 in particular where it says expenses actual.
Yep.
Can you explain why there's unexpended money in 24? Or am I not reading that correctly?
So as per the charter requirement, we're supposed to report the actual figures for fiscal years, for the 3 prior fiscal years.
Correct.
So that's fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, and fiscal year 24. Fiscal year 25 is in progress.
Right, obviously.
And so we're showing the budgeted amount for those.
Yeah.
And then the fiscal year 26 proposed budgeted amount.
Yeah. So in fiscal year 24.
Yep.
How would you explain the difference between the purple and the blue shaded areas in that graph?
Which you were looking at the budget summary?
Packet page 18, yes, the expenditure summary.
Okay, hold on one second. I thought you were looking at the budget
For
summary.
just the administration department.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, this is just the administration department. I just want to make sure that anyone who's looking at this understands what they're seeing, that's all.
Hold on one second. Do you want to move on to the administration portion?
We can. This is my last question. It's
I have
just
one more.
a general one. Oh, okay. Levi has one more.
All right.
Yeah, I think I can.
Well, hang on a minute, please. Thanks, Bob.
I just didn't have that packet up,
Yeah,
so I
no, I
apologize.
understand. That's okay.
So packet page 18.
Yep.
Yep.
And I was just looking for an explanation on FY '24.
To 25.
No, just looking at FY '24, part of that bar graph is actual expense, and part of that is expenses budgeted.
Yeah, so
Why wouldn't that, yeah, just go ahead.
essentially we expended less than what was budgeted.
Okay,
So if the budget was a little over $750,000, we expended less
Yep.
than what was budgeted. So and then fiscal year 25, the reason the number's so low is because we're only halfway,
through the year.
what we've reported in the data is halfway through the fiscal
Yeah.
year.
And clearly,
So-
obviously in FY '25, we're ahead of the game to the extent that we're.
But you'll
halfway
see in other departments that was uncommon, and that kind of answers the question that we had earlier about, contributions to fund balance are a combination of positive revenues and positive expenditures.
Yeah. And I would also want to say to anybody who's watching or listening that though it looks like we may be expending less than we thought at this point in time, the expenses coming into the town don't happen on a regular basis every month. So
No, they don't.
just because it looks like, we're doing really well, it doesn't mean that the rest of that money won't be expended. Again, I just want to say these things for somebody who doesn't have the benefit of either your experience or is new to the process. So thank you for that explanation. Levi?
So you had mentioned the land acquisition balance. Do you have any figures for the other capital reserves that we have?
We're still working on that with the audits.
Okay.
So we know that, we're gonna need capital in the future. So that's why we figured this is an opportunity to make those transfers in the capital reserve. And then the other ones that are critical that we want balances for is the TIF funds. We know there's funding available to support the TIF expenses that we have, but then in the future, we can plan other TIF expenses with eligible projects depending on the TIF program.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing originally too with a tighter budget. Just we can talk about it when we get to revenues, but particularly in the excise, just looking at what we had budgeted last year and the actuals for 22, 23, 24, we're coming in quite a bit lower than that. But we can save that
Yeah,
for
we
revenues.
can talk about that at revenues.
Anything else in the general field? All right, let's move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So let me go back to my slides here. Let me just take a drink of water. So this first budget is the administration portion of the budget. This includes the town manager with a portion of the salary for my position of $91,600. 25% of that is being charged to economic development because that's an eligible expense through an economic development program because that's areas that we work in. Our finance director position of $99,500. Our accountant position of $83,400. Our AP and payroll administrator, $54,600. Those last two positions I just mentioned were positions that the council supported in adding to help provide segregation of duties and checks and balances that we didn't have exist, where we only had one person that oversaw finances within the town, which resulted in some of the challenges that we're facing today. The town clerk position at $89,000, the deputy town clerk position at $55,800, the assistant clerks budgeted at $49,300 and $49,100 respectively, and then a clerk intern budgeted at $7,300 for an intern program that we participate in through MMA and the Margaret Chase Smith internship program. I think that's what it's called with the state. And last year we were blessed to have two, and we hope to be able to have two again in the upcoming fiscal year. Membership and dues section, I'm going to try to highlight things that are changing. The Gray Historical Society, when we had eliminated the community services portion of the budget, we had moved some memberships to specific budgets that they were related to. And I've later learned of an agreement with the Gray Historical Society that their share was used for capital expenses associated with the Historical Society building, which is the old fire station here in the village. And so we moved that to the facilities and parks capital section of the budget. Postage, legal, office supplies, all revised to support actuals. As the council who was here last year will recall, we combined a lot of these accounts, at least for town office. And so by combining all those, we've been able to recognize more appropriate spending, and we've revised those to support. Legal also was one that we combined, and I've revised that down to better support. We've had very limited legal usage, but that can come and go depending on what kind of crises you have. So we're at a number that we think we're comfortable with. The audit figure of the budget is also revised due to the contract that we have for the current audits. We'll have to update that hopefully with a new contract for after we get fiscal year 23, 24, and 25 audited. So in the next 12 months, we'll hopefully have a new contract, and hopefully with our current firm. And then general insurances are increasing an estimated 10% across the board with the various general insurances. And so those are some of the, that's the nutshell of the administration budget, and would be happy to take any questions before we advance to human resources and benefits.
Questions? Goodbye.
You mentioned the audit contract. What is that? Because we obviously budgeted 100,000 last year and then 50 this year. Is that the combined amount of the 150,000 contract for?
No,
what does it cover?
So the $100,000 was budgeted because we were uncertain of where we were going to be, and we had some crazy audit estimates given the challenging financial conditions that the town had. We had an auditor that may have fit that budget time or that budget amount, but we were able to find a better auditor after that person was no longer willing to work with the town. And so that budget figure is designed to reflect the 2 fiscal years that we'll end up having to pay for during fiscal year 26, which will be fiscal year 24 and the fiscal year 25 budget. They bill as they go, so if we do start fiscal year 24 a little bit, we can apply some of that to current year. So that budget will be able to be more accurate in future years with what the actual cost for auditing that fiscal year is, when we're not auditing multiple financial statements in one fiscal year.
That number was pretty controversial last year because it was a huge number.
It is big.
We knew that and prayed that we wouldn't need to use all of that. But those, to Mike's point, those were the kinds of estimates that we were getting at the time.
That's crazy.
So we are in a much better position than we are now. Anyone else? Krista?
Yeah. I see that you've estimated an increase for GP COG dues. Just want to make sure you're reflecting the proposed membership per capita, which is 210, it's 210 this year. It's supposed to be going up to 220.
Yeah, we've used the data that they provided. They sent out an estimate for everyone.
Okay, I wasn't sure they had.
For the fiscal year,
okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah.
And the MMA dues is a rough estimate on our part. They don't give an estimate ahead of the fiscal year. So this year we're going to be a little bit over in that budget line. It's not huge, but we'll try to hone that in over the years.
Okay. And do you find the contingency amount that you're budgeting, because I know we've combined several contingency accounts starting last year rather than having them broken down by department. Do you find that this amount is reflective of the use or the need?
Yeah, I think it is, given a budget of our size. We have, obviously if we had an emergency that was, hundreds of thousands of dollars, we would have to come and seek allocation for using fund balance or other emergency funds. We have a couple of type contingency accounts within the budget, one of which is that one, the specific contingency, and the other which is the separation pay, which was based on audit feedback that you guys had before, that when people left and cashed out their vacation and sick time, it was negatively affecting budgetary figures. So those are kind of like buffer accounts per se to offset when those things happen. But thankfully we haven't had to charge anything to contingency. The other thing we do is if we have ongoing expenses that seem to cost more than what we estimated, rather than charge them to contingency, we want to charge them to the actual budget line so you can see the history to be like, oh, well, this budget cost more than we anticipated, so we're going to budget correctly for the next fiscal year, rather than have to revert to the contingency and estimate. So the contingency line, I view as kind of like a buffer line for those budgets to just simply offset.
What Or an emergency,
Yes.
which could be a one-time event.
It could be,
Yeah.
if it was smaller than 50,000.
Mike?
Maybe I'm not reading this right, but merchant fees, for example, there's nothing there.
So on which page are you on?
So I'm looking at the, this right here.
Which page number?
Page 20.
Yep.
So when you look down there, you've got merchant fees. In 23, there was 16,000. Then it goes to zero. And when I'm thinking of merchant fees, are you talking about the transaction fees for accepting credit cards? Is that what that is?
This is to have access to those systems.
Okay.
And so I think there was something else they were running through back in fiscal year 23.
Okay.
But this was something that wasn't budgeted for in the prior budgets, and we're putting it in to make sure that we have that properly reflected.
So you're putting in 2,000?
Yeah.
Yes, that's at
Okay.
$2,000
Okay.
for this fiscal year.
And then are we also assuming I don't see anything for telephone, cell phone, internet, that's all?
So all those budgets that you see blanks on, a lot of them were combined into a specific department. So all the IT related items
Okay.
are all combined into the IT budget. We did that as part of last fiscal year, and you'll see all those numbers combined in there. So then once these older budgets roll off, those lines will be able to go away, and you won't see them. You won't see those blanks.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm comparing apples to apples, because like electricity, for example, all of a sudden, we don't get charged electricity. I mean,
It's hard to compare apples to apples with this change, but in the future you'll be able to with the.
so where would electricity be?
So it's on the facilities budget.
Facilities, okay.
Under the part under the building specific.
Okay.
So you'll see in those that specific building electricity, and you'll be able to see that all in one budget in one place. And as these old ones roll off, you'll be able to see the history together.
And is that number over there to show you that what it was before, just so we can see the difference?
It isn't.
So I have,
yeah.
okay, all right.
If you wanted to see what was done in fiscal year 22 or 23, because if we did that, it would be improperly reporting where those budget lines were.
Okay,
We decided to make a sea change with last year's budget to
Okay.
consolidate all those. So, but because we're showing the previous year's history, that's why you see those figures in those
no problem.
lines. It's not a big issue, but we have bought some additional vehicles for staff to use, and so I was a little surprised to see an increase in the mileage number. Again, it's not a big number, but do you foresee our needs changing there as far as transportation is concerned?
No, and that's primarily to support the administrative staff that I listed off
Yep.
that go to trainings. The vehicles that we purchased were for usage around town, so
Yep.
the inspectors, code enforcement, and assessing. So we'll use them as much as possible. For instance, I'm going to an event Monday evening for a recognition that someone from the town's receiving as part of the recreation conference, and so we're going to use one of the vehicles to get there. Some of us are going to a training next Friday, which is the day that we're closed. We'll use them to get there. So we'll work together to try to use them as much as possible, but we just want to better reflect that. Some of those are so a lot of the trainings that I may attend that are outside of the general area. So I just want to make sure that was accurately reflected for the future.
And then my only other question is with regards to the heading, again, just clarifying for people. The FY26, the first column says requested.
Yes.
I assume that's from the department heads?
Yes, that's what was requested.
Just,
Yeah.
Again, just so for somebody who's seeing this, who was the one that requested it? Because they are different numbers sometimes than your own. in the
Sometimes
next
they're
column.
lower, sometimes they're
Right.
increased.
Yeah,
if-
okay. I
Based
just
on
wanted
what
to
we reviewed.
clarify that piece. Anything else? All right, we can move on.
Okay, great. So for the human resources and benefits, this position, this includes the human resource director of $100,500 for that position. It also includes health insurance premiums. The increase for health insurance is due to new positions, as well as a 10% increase on 1/1. So that averages out, which it might be confusing. It averages out to the 6% increase that I show in the budget. So where most everyone in the municipal government world is estimating about a 10% increase. Thankfully, our health insurance program used to be renewed in September. The town was on an odd cycle, and thanks to the great work of our HR director, Jonathan Hart, he was able to get that onto
Fiscal
calendar year, which is easier for us to budget. There's nobody that really has it in a fiscal year, so we're able to get it that way. So it's easier to plan for the future, and it's easier for employees. We don't have 2 open enrollment seasons and things of that nature. So that was a good success that we had this year.
At least the budget's got 1 foot in each year instead of spread the way it was before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then workers' compensation increased due to increases in payroll for the town, as well as subcontractor liability. So one of the things that hadn't been done in years past was whenever the town conducts work with a subcontractor, they're supposed to provide a few things: W-9 forms so we can properly, issue them 1099s, but also workers' compensation insurance or a waiver of workers' compensation insurance. And so that's something that we're going to do in more detail going forward that hadn't been done appropriately in years past. And that will hopefully help to get that number down. We're also, we've heard of some nearby municipalities who met with workers' compensation insurance providers outside of the main municipal risk pool that may be able to offer more favorable pricing. So we're going to get some of those estimates. Maybe before the end of the budget cycle, we might have a reduction, but that's what we're estimating right now. And then we'll work to get that subcontractor liability down, and that's because they account for some of those subcontractor costs in the calculations for workers' comp if that vendor doesn't provide. So going forward, we'll be requesting not only W-9 forms, we'll be requesting workers' compensation information as well as ACH information so we can work to electronically transmit payments in the future through our bank, which is a much more efficient process than sending checks to every vendor like we do now. And then personnel development, that budget line increased to support the education reimbursement program that the council had a goal to establish in years past, and we more appropriately reflect in our personnel policy. The health reimbursement account, or referred to as the HRA, is reduced to 30% of the actual liability, which is about the industry standard in that area. And we're going to use the remaining funds in that budget line in fiscal year 25 to establish a reserve fund for the HRA. So if there was ever a year that we were going to go over, or ever a year that we built that reserve up to be fairly healthy, we could reduce what we need to put in the budget on an annual basis. And so again, that's just an estimate for health reimbursement associated with health expenses for employees. And then employment taxes are increased to support increases of payroll and more accurate with ClearGov. One of the most amazing tools with ClearGov is the personnel budgeting tool. And so we entered every employee individually with all their wages, all their contributions and everything. And we were able to more accurately reflect all of those figures. And that's the same thing that happened for both Mission Square and Maine PERS, or the Maine Public Employees Retirement System. And so that's the human resources and benefits budget in a nutshell. I do have department heads specifically to those departments. I'll do my best to answer as many questions. If there's something that they can support us on or expand on, they're here to help answer questions as well.
Questions?
Yeah, I'll just, can I go through them real quick? So my first question is if it's requested of 96,102, why are we given 105?
Because that was what the wages were currently, and that's what we're going to based on the scale that we're establishing based on experiences.
Okay, so it's 11%, which is, okay. And then when we go down to, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here because my next question was on the new fee that we're paying, the Maine Family Medical Leave. Is that our percent or is that the total?
That's the town's percentage.
That's the town's percent. Okay,
Yep.
I just want to make
And
sure.
that increased because that began in the middle of the fiscal year, and now
Yeah.
we're budgeting for a full fiscal year.
Okay, all right. And then when we have that significant reduction, my concern is this, is that, you know, we show a reduction this year, but is it going to be back next year?
In
You
which
know.
one?
So in the Mission Square one,
Yep.
I think it says there's an 83,466 reduction. You know, are we going to see that higher next year? Are we going to gain that $83,000 back? Or I just want to make sure that when we're saying all these cuts, so we can do all this stuff, that they're not going to get us next year and be, we're going to hire people that we can't afford next year, I guess is what I'm saying.
So that's a best estimate on, like I said, current employees, we put their exact contributions. And so if someone were to change their contributions throughout the year, we have a matching program. And so those numbers could change. I also budgeted for any vacant positions in the budget. And this is, again, a great tool that the ClearGov personnel budgeting module had. I budgeted them at like the worst case retirement contribution. So we do have that. And then the reason that budget line reduces so much is I've estimated some employees transitioning to participate in the main PERS program, which part of the recent personnel policies. So that's why that one is showing an increase, in addition to just the natural increase of costs in that, primarily for our fire department employees, which participate in that program. I've estimated that some employees are going to change to participate in that other program. And so those two budgets this year are going to kind of be in flux as we transition and finalize our new retirement offering. And then that will be probably more accurate in future years, those two figures. But I think they offset each other appropriately.
Okay.
And just so anyone who's listening might, that the Mission Squared is the current offering.
Yeah, it's an equivalent of like a 401k in the public sector. It's called a 457.
I think someone looking at the budget might not know what Mission Squared is.
Yes.
Councilor Gass has joined us online. I want to give you a chance. Ann, do you have any questions on this part of the budget?
No, I don't. Not at this point. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry to be joining you late.
No. Krista, do you have any questions?
No, Mike answered everything I was going to ask. So.
Okay. All set.
So all set with human resources?
Yes, yeah, you answered my question too. This
Great.
is on the professional development. Oh, the professional development one basically is also an estimate. Or have you?
It is.
Yeah,
So
we haven't had time to.
Yeah, so I budgeted the increased figure, was 10,500. That's exactly, I kept the professional development line what we had, and I increased it by 10,500. So that's an estimate that potentially 2 employees could participate at the max that they can participate in a fiscal year.
And I should remember, but my brain's swimming a bit. Going forward in the personnel policy, employees have to request access to that money at the beginning of the year, so that going forward, when you're budgeting, you'll have a much clearer idea of what that amount is, as opposed to having estimate. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And then the greatest thing also that's outlined in the policy is it also says as funds are funds are available.
Yep.
So if we get 3 people who want to participate in it and we can utilize as funds are available, when they're out, we can
It's
say
out.
no. The policy gives us the ability to say nobody else can participate this year, and you can plan to do it next year.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
It's not a big thing, but I see that we've got an $8,000 budget for employee recognition, and it doesn't look like we've really used it. And it looks like we used $491. This is something that I actually want used. Right? Is there a reason we're not utilizing it since we have it? Because to me, all these other things that we're doing are great, but there's nothing like a pat on the shoulder, a cake or something like that. Is there reasons why we're not doing it? Do you guys have a plan to recognize people in the future, or?
We have an incredible employee recognition committee that one of the members, which is here, and they're very, very responsible with the resources that are available. But a lot of the events that we have that we contribute to the town using town share are done on the back half of the fiscal year. That's the hard part with a lot of the work we do. It's not like a monthly responsibility. So we have a staff meeting where we recognize employees and we provide gifts and things of that nature. That happens in June. We buy employees lunch in the spring, and we do that, and that's a big chunk of the cost. But we're doing it all throughout the year. We're just utilizing the resources as best as possible to make sure we do that. Some of the events that we have in the spring and in the fall and winter, we have like a potluck. So the costs associated with that are minimal where we work together. But we do a lot of them in the later part of the fiscal year.
Okay. No, I just, a good example is the plow guys. If they're out all night plowing, wouldn't it be great for them to come in and get a hot pizza or, something like that? I'd love to see some of that money used for that.
Yeah, we do that stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? On we go.
Oh, the general assistance administrator position, which is a stipend that an existing employee receives who has other responsibilities of $11,100. And the services that are provided, the costs are a best estimate on historical community needs. And these are all reimbursed from the state at 70%. And I'll get into more detail about those in just a second. And then the increase in professional services is an increase to support Cumberland County as our general assistance backup. We had no backup in the years past where if the administrator was on vacation, if they were on medical leave, if anything that took place, they had a day off, they were sick, we didn't have any backup. So that is and they charge us per the time that we provide a backup. So that's our best estimate that we'll need for backup. But now we have that resource available. And then on the budget specifically, the services numbers are the, hold on here. What packet page is the
35, 35,
35, okay.
or that's one
Yeah,
of the
thank you.
pages. Yeah.
So the services that are reimbursed at 70% from the state are the food and household personal supplies, heating, fuel, rentals, utilities, burial, and medical reimbursement. The rest of the budget is not reimbursed by the state and is an expense of the town to administer that service. There's been debates and things like that with the state and as part of the state budget associated with those costs. Currently, there's no reimbursement for those. And then there's also a debate amongst the legislature to maybe increase that reimbursement to 90%, which if that, and then again, this is an estimate. So we're bound by state law to provide services whether we have money in the budget or not, because we always get reimbursed for those. So for instance, food and household reimbursement. In prior year, the historical usage hasn't been that much, but this year it's been much higher and we're forecasting it to be much higher. And that's why we increased that budget. But if for some reason that budget needed to be throughout the fiscal year, $20,000, and people qualify and they've requested those needs, we're bound by state law to provide those services. The same thing with rentals. In years past, they used higher amounts. We haven't had as much of that, so we've lowered that figure. But again, this budget is like our best guess estimate based on usage, but we could have spikes throughout the budget year, and we have to provide those services due to state law.
Questions? Krista?
Just along those lines, I see that you increased the allocation for food and household personal supplies quite a bit because the use this year has been quite a bit larger. You've also allocated quite a bit more under utilities, but the usage doesn't reflect that. So I'm just curious why we've allocated another $3,500 for that.
So again, these reflect 12/31. So
Okay.
we know that we're budgeting, that we've had fuel requests in the last few months and things of that nature. So we kind of know where things are going. And so we want to make sure that we appropriately budget those.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but
Yeah, so this is the one that I had one of the largest issues actually with, is that if I understand this correctly, we're paying someone an additional $11,000 on top of whatever we're paying. And I don't know who's doing it or whatever, but are they doing their job and then adding an extra 10 hours a week on for this pay? Or we're just paying them an extra $11,000? I want to make sure that, if it's part of their job requirement, then why is it just in their base pay? That's what I'm concerned with.
So they perform some of these duties while they're while they're here and part of their normal job, but they're on call 24/7, 365 days a year for emergencies.
And am I reading this right? We're going up 5, we're doubling it?
No, it was in fiscal year 25, it was $10,400, and I'm just increasing it to $11,100.
Going up $700.
Okay, because the actual says 5,200, that's why.
Because that's as of December
Oh, as of-
31st.
okay, as
That's
of so far.
halfway through the
Okay,
year, halfway
okay.
through the fiscal year.
I see, all right.
But the primary need for it is they're on call 24/7, 365.
Except, well, weekends, how's that work?
They get the call. They get calls. If someone has an emergency, we have it posted here. And if someone calls our emergency services, 911, public safety, that person's contact is that person is reached out to then reach out to the client who has like the urgent need.
And how does that dovetail with the weekend coverage that you were talking about earlier?
So the coverage I talked about for backup, that's simply if the person's not available. So if someone says they're going away for the weekend, if they're going to go on medical leave, if they're ill, if there's different things, we need a backup in place. So that's an estimate to happen when those, otherwise there would be nobody to take the calls.
Yep. No, I just wanted it to be clear to everybody what that number was for.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just a clarifying question. You mentioned that that backup coverage was allocated in which line? I forgot.
Under the professional services line,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we increased that line by $2,500
I see that.
from the 840.
Okay.
And we had no backup for a number of years, and it's not fair to that person to be expected
Yeah.
to not be able to take a vacation, not be able to go on medical leave, and still have to respond to those calls. So
It's a safety net.
yes.
And I apologize if I missed it, but the utilities line, again, that big increase, it seems like, I understand this is for December 31st, and we've had a lot of cold weather since then. So are you basically saying that history for January and February is taken into account here, which is why this number is?
Yeah, so a lot of times if we have unexpected expenses, we monitor our financial accounts all the time.
Yeah.
And so, I'm monitoring these things as I'm preparing the budget. Most of them aren't off based on the half year estimate, but things like that are stuff that I can see continue to be a problem. In addition to utilities costs continue to increase, and we want to make sure, but we know we've had fuel requests and increases that have come in over and above what we have budgeted, in this since December 31st. So we want to make sure we properly budget.
And
It wouldn't be responsible of us to know that those expenses are coming and
Yes.
not help properly reflect the budget.
Yep. I was asked specifically, so I just want to put the question forward. So we're still referring people to the food bank. We still use those kinds of services when they work and when they're available. CMP has programs to help people with their utility bills or help spread that expense out over the course of the year. So I told this person that, when we tapped into those things, we encourage people to use those other resources too. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct. And general assistance is the absolute last resort for folks. And they have to provide financial data and information that they have no other resources available. And they've exhausted all other resources. And so the help with food, we're supplementing. They get a lot of food from the food bank, but that doesn't necessarily include fresh food and things of that nature. So everything's worked together to provide the person the assistance that they need and that we're required to provide by state law.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Any other questions, Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to, believe it or not, I actually want to increase this. I'm really concerned that it's not enough. With everything that I've read lately, that, things are going to be changing, that we're going to get a lot more requests. And, although it's not our job to take care of everybody, I think we should have at least $1,000 a month in there for food. I mean, I don't think that's unrealistic for a town this size. Don't worry, I'll get to you later when I want money off of this, but I'd actually prefer to raise that number myself. I just don't think that's realistic. I just don't think it's enough for a town this size. I know it's a last resort, but I'd much rather see, $12,000 there than in some other places, but that's just my opinion.
We can straw poll it to see if there's any other support for that. I'm Krista.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, the usage in the years past hasn't reflected that kind of allocation, but I agree with you. The dynamics in the economy are fluctuating daily, and tariffs might be impactful for people. So I would be in favor of raising it.
Levi?
Yeah, I think I'd be fine with that. I mean, I had the same thought where the past year's actuals, I look at it more as a whole in terms of the money available, but in terms of adding to it to make sure there's always the contingency safety net in terms of money too. So I'm fine with it if that's, the majority.
Anne?
I mean, I think it's, I kind of trust Michael and our GA staff person to sort of be looking at trends. But I also agree that we're kind of in a whole new place now with the economy, and housing prices aren't going down, and people are losing their jobs, and may continue to. So I would be supportive of going up slightly on there.
Okay. I'm okay leaving it the way it is because I think there is contingency. I mean, there is also, if there is a meltdown, the town manager has the ability to come to the council and say, we've got this problem. So for that reason, I think I would leave it be. So it looks like we're going to leave it the way it is. Yes.
May I just briefly explain? If we do have like the food goes from 8,000 to 16,000, we get reimbursed by that at 70% from the state. So it's not a huge budgetary impact for us. And so knowing that the economy may be more uncertain in the next fiscal year, it'll be good for us to get that data to then come back to you next fiscal year with that history reflected. So if we see usage of these things grows by 20, 30, 40% based on some of the concerns that we all agree exist, we can better reflect that in the future.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else for general assistance? We'll move on then.
So communications and IT is the next budget we have, and this has positions that are included are the director, with half of the share of the director's salary, $41,700.
So just, sorry, let me catch up with you because this isn't in the order of the
This
packet.
is, what page are we on?
So it is,
It's packet page.
Page 35 and 36.
Yeah.
No, we're going back.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, cool.
I apologize, they weren't in order.
nope, that's all right.
We laid out the agenda based on availability and
Yeah, no,
staff.
it doesn't have to be in order. Just need to know where it is.
So this includes positions for the director, again, 50% of that salary at $41,700. The other 50% is budgeted in economic development to support communication and marketing of the community. Our IT systems administrator at $82,600. The new broadcaster position that we combined with New Gloucester of $29,700. And that's just simply an estimate. That's an hourly position that it fluctuates between various weeks, and a portion of that is shared by the New Gloucester as well as potentially revenue from the school department to participate with us. And then there's also a summer intern included as part of the same program I mentioned earlier for $7,300. And this includes all the telephone, internet, softwares, copiers, printers, and it is net, since we had the combined budgetary figures, it better reflects those costs. Computer support and software are now properly budgeted. We've had some increases in some. We've had some that we've eliminated. One that you'll be happy to eliminate it is we eliminated the Duo two-factor authentication program. So we'll be implementing in the coming weeks a text messaging two-factor authentication program. So folks will be happy about that. And then one of the softwares that we've proposed to eliminate is the Granicus software, which is the agenda management software that we continue to have challenges with, and we're going to tackle that portion either with existing resources we have, such as Microsoft Office 365 and Adobe, or maybe explore another software that's a little bit more affordable. Granicus is really designed for large municipalities, and it does a lot more things that we just simply don't use, and it costs a lot of money annually. And then equipment, which is basically computer hardware, that's been reduced due to needs. We had a higher budget last year. We've replaced a lot of those items that we did last year, so we don't need as many of those this year, and so we've budgeted that to better reflect. Some of those, I think, equipment in the past had been included in capital budgets, and so they don't have lifespans to be able to be included in a capital budget, so we've included those in the operating budget. So that is the communications and IT budget in a nutshell.
Questions? Levi?
So I have a question on the software. Is there a breakdown kind of on the increase of that, what that's made up of? Obviously, you talked about dropping Granicus, and then I assume ClearGov is a big piece of that.
Yeah, so in the past, some computer support wasn't in the right place and softwares weren't. So some softwares were in computer support and some, so that's kind of, those kind of offset one another a little bit. They don't completely. But we do have a breakdown of all the various softwares and computer supports we could list out and provide to everyone if they'd like.
Yeah.
I like I'm used to, I guess, more really in kind of in-depth aspect of it, at least when you're talking about bigger changes. So I at least like to see that stuff when it comes to, that.
Yeah, we can craft a spreadsheet and show those and show ones that were moved and things of that nature. We just wanted to have them be in the right spots where some of them weren't.
Fair enough. Other questions?
I noticed that we're not budgeting for webmaster fees and technical support. Is that where the Granicus space is, or like what? Why?
So again, some of those were ones that weren't in the right accounts, and so we're trying to streamline budget lines and put them in the proper places. So that's part of the reason as well that some of those lines increased and decreased. So we'll try to analyze those, those 4 lines and show you the differences and where they're placed now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be helpful, just because there's a lot of changes between fiscal years on this one in particular. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Mike?
Cell phones, $20,000. Whose cell phones are we paying for?
We have a number of phones for various department heads, public safety staff. So that's actually an estimate as well to if we have to issue any others for other staff and department heads. But that's a best guess estimate of the phones that we need to provide for our staff to be able to conduct their jobs.
So you feel that those are necessary?
So it's an estimate. So we might not spend that much, but we just want to make sure we have the appropriate amount budgeted for the future. But based on our usage and appropriate monthly fees, that's what we feel where we should be at.
There was, if I remember correctly, a public safety component to this too, when we drafted our emergency planning and coordinating with the county and sort of disaster preparedness when hard lines are down and people are scattered around. So at that time, the council decided to kind of bite the bullet and increase the number of cell phone usages for that too.
So this is pub safe in there too?
Yep. So we subscribe the service Councilor McGuire is describing as FirstNet. So it's a service that and all municipal employees have that now. We used to just be public safety employees, but it supersedes any other cell service that exists. So if there's an emergency that exists, we take priority to be able to help deal with emergency situations over cell phone data transmissions versus cell phone data and voice transmissions over the general public.
Right.
And that was established after as a recommendation of the 9/11 Commission. And so it's in place, and municipalities all over have this service to be able to do that.
And
It's backed by the federal government.
The cell phone allocation used to be budgeted across each department, but we've changed it now, so it's just in this one
Yeah, we've
location.
combined all the budgets across different departments into one budget.
Okay.
Which ultimately will have fewer account numbers.
Right.
Theoretically, it will be easier to keep track of things, I think.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, most businesses are not paying for cell phones anymore, because everyone carries them and, unless I can see where Mike would need one and the head of a couple, but
Yeah.
that seems awful, a lot more than needed, but
It's a big number. There's no
it
doubt
is a
about it.
big number.
Any other questions? No? Seeing none, I guess we can move on.
So the next budget is our newly combined code enforcement and planning department. I think this is on packet page.
32 is where the
On page 32, we're going
Yeah.
back? Okay.
Yeah, packet page 32 is where the actual spreadsheet is. And so in this historical figures, we tried to show the old budget combined with the new one. And so this department includes the director, which is also our code enforcement officer, at $103,600. The planner at $84,300. Administrative assistants at $50,000 and $49,800 respectively, as well as our part-time assistant code enforcement officers at $52,000 and $51,500. This combined department results in approximately a $70,000 reduction, or it's down about 12% over the previous budget.
questions. Mike?
Yeah, so last week, last week, we talked about sharing with, Cumberland. And we're getting reimbursed at what, $42,000?
We share with North Yarmouth, and we get reimbursed at $44,000.
$44,000,
Yeah.
but it's costing us 51 plus all their costs.
I'm not sure.
Am I missing something here? So that employee that we're sharing with them, it's really our part-time employee.
It's a portion of our whole department. So our department, it's not an employee, it's our department. So we conduct inspections for them.
Mm-hmm.
So like I described, if an inspector's out, has various appointments, they may stop and do an inspection in North Yarmouth and then come over. So it's a small portion of our entire department.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm thinking to myself that we're really funding theirs, because if we eliminated that position, we would still have enough, I think, if we weren't sharing it, but that's my personal.
Well, we had that same amount of staff existed before we shared. So if we eliminated that partnership, we just simply would lose the revenue.
Well, I guess my thoughts, if that person can go over there, or we can divide up that time, then we don't need that person, is my thought. I think we probably have one staff too many. If we can really give up that much time to send over there, I just feel like we're helping pay for theirs. But I said that last week as well. So,
Anyone else?
It
Krista.
looks like Ian had a question.
Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. And apologies, Michael, if you've mentioned this already, but are you planning to make permanent the merging of those departments so that I think the code enforcement department head will also be head of planning? Is that the plan going forward?
Yeah, so this is the proposed combined department. The code enforcement officer, her current code enforcement officer who's been serving as the interim director of the combined department on a temporary basis while the previous planning director transitions into retirement. They'll oversee the department in general from a operational manager standpoint, but the town planner is actually going to take all the primary planning responsibilities, and then the code enforcement staff will do the code enforcement responsibilities. But that person will be the general supervisor of that department.
Okay, and that's more, in terms of the planning, it's more sort of administration for the department and not so much like day-to-day supervision on planning issues.
Yes, exactly. And they were available, and they have extensive, our director, Tammy Munson, who's here, and she's going to say a word after. She has extensive experience in municipal planning and code enforcement for decades, and can, work with the planner and provide feedback and bounce things off one another. So I'm very confident that this combined structure will work well. It's fairly common in municipalities across Maine to be a combined department. They work so intertwined together. It doesn't make sense for them to be a separate siloed entity, and this will hopefully promote, better collaboration and working together.
Okay,
Krista.
thanks.
Oops, sorry. Sorry. Did you have more, Ann?
No, I'm all set. I said
All
that.
set. Krista.
Just a couple questions. I know we're looking at expenses now, not revenues, but where do you reflect the $44,000 share we're getting from North Yarmouth to support the services in the CEO department?
It's in the intergovernmental
Okay.
revenue line.
Yeah, I had
of our
questions about what
revenues.
that was. So
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
helpful. Thank you. And then the professional services line for this department has gone down quite a bit. And I'm just wondering what the decrease is reflecting there.
Yeah, so that decreases, the combined usage and what's needed and what's not needed. We feel a little bit more aggressive in that to have some professional services available if we need assistance with comp plan implementation and the rezoning and things of that nature. That in the future, I think that may be able to level out over the years, but that's just a result of us combining and right sizing the various professional services that we provide that are included in there.
Anyone else?
And the professional services, I'll just also mention,
Sure.
also includes our contributions to our lake associations that we participate in. We took
Oh,
those
okay.
from
Okay.
community
What is
services.
it? What we put in there annually for the Little Sebago Lake?
Yeah.
Little Sebago Lake,
Yeah.
Crystal Lake,
Lake.
and
Forest.
Forest Lake.
Forest Lake?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to, continuing your concerns there, Mike, about the agreement with North Yarmouth. It could be that, that time could be considered extra, but I think of it as being more elastic than that. So when our department's busy, we have more staff available, and I think it's not a consistent kind of effort, because obviously there is a construction season. But so I think of it as actually giving us some revenue for that, but also providing ourselves with some elasticity and the ability to cope with, surges in the demand for those services. Tammy.
Thanks, Dan. Tammy Munson, I'm the code enforcement officer. Now that we've been doing this for a year, I can give you a much better idea of what this looks like. And because I think the perception is that we're sharing, that we have somebody down there 24 hours a week as a part-time employee. And that's not the case at all. The bulk of the work, all of the administrative work, and the bulk of all of the work other than an inspection is done by myself. The convenient thing about North Yarmouth is that a lot of our hours are opposite. So like their late night is Monday. So will go down there, which really doesn't even impact my day, later in the day until at 4:30 in the afternoon, and stay until close or later. Thursdays, they're open until 5. We close at 3. I may leave here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So when we set up the agreement, it was 5 to 10 hours a week. And out of our work week, I don't even know if my inspectors are doing 5 to 10 hours a week of work down there. So it's really a win-win situation for the town of Gray, because we are gaining $42,000 from them, or $44,000. And I couldn't say that, if people over there analyze that they might think it's too much. So I think it's a fair figure. They're happy with the services. A lot of times we're extremely close to the places that we're going anyways. So I just wanted to give you a better feel for, we're not taking away 10 hours of a work week of my time or their time, because conveniently it's during our hours that we're not even here. So with saying that, if anybody has any questions, if you want me to clarify any of the operational stuff, please go ahead and ask me.
I do get a lot of comments about it, and it's, and I'll answer it that way, because, when you think about it logically, it feels like we're, helping them. And I know we're helping them, but because we're the ones that pay for the, any of the overtime, I don't mean overtime, but any of the, the Social Security, all those expenses, we're paying for all that type of stuff. And they're kind of getting out of it. They don't have to pay for sick time. They don't have to pay for any of that stuff. They're just giving us a flat 40. Because, you know, a salaried person, there's a lot more than just, let's say it's $50,000. There's a lot more that it costs us as a community. And, you know, a salary person probably costs us $70,000 or $75,000, you know, with all the benefits that we provide. So I just want to make sure that we're not just looking at this and saying, okay, you know, we're paying this person, you know, $50,000. Well, we're not really paying that person $50,000. We're really paying them $75,000. So if, you know, if in reality, only half their time is there, then that's okay. But if they're spending more than 50% of their time or a group of time over there, then I don't think it's a good deal for us.
Yeah, my inspectors are not spending that amount of time over there.
Okay.
So,
Good.
And I'll just, if I may add, if I've observed this and worked with Tammy and worked with the town manager in North Yarmouth, if I thought we were being taken advantage of, the agreement wouldn't be that rate. We're benefiting.
Yep.
You know, and they look at it as a win-win. They might, if somebody over there wanted to analyze that we're only doing 5 to 10 or maybe even less than that, as Tammy just mentioned, they're saving because they used to pay $75,000 plus for a code enforcement officer, that now they don't have to have that full responsibility, and that they can work with us and we can help our neighbors out. And I'm sure if there was an opportunity in the other direction that they had a resource that we didn't have, or we had a vacancy in, that they would help us as well. And so it's good for us to work together with our neighbors on a regular basis. And I think that this is a win-win for everyone. And I can assure you we're not being taken advantage of.
Personally, I think over time, we're going to have to look at regionalization for some things just to try and keep the costs down in any case. So
Yeah.
I think these are kind of the baby steps for maybe some other of those kinds of things that might come in the future. And you had a question?
I just wanted to concur with what you said, Dan, that I think that this provides more flexibility, and my impression is that it hasn't been easy to hire code enforcement officers, not for us, not for other towns, and towns tend to hire them away from each other. In fact, I mean, there was a bit of that several years ago, and I think this is a great situation. I'm in agreement that we should be looking at more regionalization, and you know, for some of these services, and it's a win-win for the town. Definitely, I'm happy with it.
Great, thanks. Is just a quick, is there a way that we can get the volume turned up a little bit for, oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm having a weird hum on my line. I don't know if you guys are hearing the same, but I've been trying to keep my mic off and my my volume down a little bit because it's so loud.
You're only hearing it on your end, so.
We can hear you loud, and I think you can hear it loud and clear better now.
Yes, we can, yep,
Thank
we can hear you.
for taking care of that, Chris and Brett.
Anything else? All right, let's move on.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
the next budget that we have on is assessing, and I should have done the budget page numbers, so I apologize.
okay.
29 is the chart.
So packet page 29 is the chart for assessing, and this includes the assessor with a salary of $101,500 and a deputy assessor of $63,700. And really the only change in this budget was we reduced the remaining funds for revaluation, we reduced the valuation line. Remaining funds for that will be set aside into appropriate designated account. We were able to discover through some of our reconciliation activities some of the monies that were set aside, not all of them. So we were able to offset that current fiscal year. We'll set aside money for a future revaluation, and we'll reestablish that annual set aside in the next fiscal year. Right now, we probably estimate a revaluation. The next revaluation that would need to take place would be a full-blown revaluation where they inspect homes and things of that nature. And I think we're looking at it being maybe in excess of $500,000 to happen. So we'll want to set money aside and try to save for that.
Okay. Any question? Oh, sorry.
Assessing budget in a nutshell, yes.
Any questions for assessing?
I just had a quick follow-up.
Krista?
One of my questions was going to be whether or not we were setting money aside in a reserve account for future evaluations. So I was glad to hear that you thought ahead on that. I guess I'm wondering just where we're doing this, those reserve accounts in a couple instances. In years past, sometimes they'd be in our capital reserve listed out individually, and I know we've been changing how we're accounting for those. Where are we now accounting for these reserve accounts that aren't actually capital expenditures?
So we will be accounting for them in our accounting system as designated funds.
Okay.
And when we get everything reconciled, I'll hope to have a report for you to let you know where we have designated funds set aside and for what purpose.
Okay.
And that's a part of our auditing function, and also work that our staff accountant, Debbie, is taking on to get that all organized for us so we can more better reflect. Previous staff used to use like the budget as a whole and not put things into designated funds and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
we're going to try to more properly reflect that so it shows on the balance sheet. And then in the future with ClearGov, we can kind of show you that if we're doing a capital budget for a certain project, that we can say, okay, we're going to raise, $10,000 for this project, but we're going to use $10,000 in reserve funds. And we can show you what budget line or what designated fund those reserve funds are going to be, rather than funding the whole thing with raising, or we can fund a whole project with a designated reserve fund. So we're trying to get those in order based on, I know like in years past, the council set aside money for a skate park,
Right.
Things of that nature. So when we get some of those, we can revisit those to see if those goals are still in place, and maybe reallocate them for other projects if they're not. And so we'll hopefully have that in the near future.
And they'll
Okay.
all be in one place, basically.
They'll all be in the right place in the accounting system.
Yeah,
Yes.
just going forward, and I know that it's dependent on when auditing is finished for those years. It will be super useful to have that just all allocated and laid out for us in one place, because I think from year to year, it's been counselors oftentimes keeping track of these funds that we were intending to set aside, and as councils change and such, that will be harder to do. So I'm glad that we're getting on top of that.
Yeah, we're trying to reconcile some of the old ones, and with the support of current counselors and former counselors, and we'll get those all in order, and then they'll be appropriately documented in the future.
Okay, great. Sorry, I know that was kind of an aside to the
No, that's
assessing,
a
but
very
I appreciate
important
Take
question.
up all the skeletons.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? All right, I guess we can move on then.
So library, this includes our director at $100,500.
42.
Our head of circulation, $52,100. Head of youth services, $57,400. Circulation assistants, $37,700, $28,000, and $25,600 respectively. And then we have some per diem staff at $8,600. Again, the library is a pretty status quo budget, and the major increase is under the main InfoNet expense, and that's an increase to support costs in a revised van delivery contract. So as part of that, we share resources with other libraries. You may recall at one time there was a stoppage in that service due to some contract disputes, and so thankfully that service has continued, and that's ultimately the major increase reflected in the library budget as a whole. But last year, you may recall, we mentioned that there may be like a reorganization because we had some vacant positions, and so our library director, Josh, did an outstanding job to kind of reorganize and utilize some experienced people that have been retired in some per diem staff positions that can help coordinate some specific functions within the library, and then invested that into more staff to be able to support the field, rather than have like a higher level deputy director position like we had in the past.
Questions?
I just have one.
Krista?
Where are we accounting for the costs associated with the Minerva system? That's different from main info?
That's also in the main
Is
InfoNet
that-
line.
oh,
Yeah,
is
that's
it?
included in the
Okay.
main InfoNet line as well.
Got it.
Yeah, that's the delivery part is part of the Minerva system.
Okay, yeah,
so.
I thought it was, but then I was a little confused. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think that's all I had. So.
I'm just curious about usage of the library. I believe the usage is up at the library, a fairly significant amount, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yeah, I think it's growing exponentially. I'll invite Josh up to maybe kind of expand on history and things that are happening and the efforts that he's doing to promote not just normal things like books and magazines to video games and other things that people can utilize.
I mean,
resources
it
for.
is a 2.9% increase, but there's a significant increase in the number of people who are using the services, so.
Yeah, actually, we have prided ourselves on our collection. Hi, Josh Tiffany, Director of the Great Public Library. We always pride ourselves on our collection, and for a while we were sending out almost double and sometimes triple the amount of stuff as we were getting in. Through our staff customer service focus, through an amazing youth services department, we are now almost equal as that for what we send out and what we get in. We had a 12% increase in overall circulation and use by our patrons last year, and that is just one portion of what we do. Fortunately, I didn't come with all my numbers ready, but our program offerings are now incredibly standardized and known throughout the community. Our use as a meeting space for a tremendous number of community assets and organizations continues on, and the library truly has become a hub of this community, and that has been my goal since day one. So to have people now know about the Great Public Library statewide and have more people on a daily basis come through our doors in order to say, I want to be your patron and I love what you're doing here is absolutely resounding to us. So, and also very happy to do this given the budget that we're given every year. I am thankful for every dime, and we try and milk as much as we can out of every cent that is provided. So just thank you very much for the support. And yeah, if there are any further questions for me.
No, I think,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead, Mike.
absolutely. So I see that you requested 33,000. Mike only gave you 30. I want to give you 40. Listen, I love to read. I think it's important that, we utilize this. I'd like to see more money going towards it. I can't believe that we're getting the services that we get for only spending $30,000 a year. I mean, I actually want to give him the $33,000 that he requested.
Okay.
Are you talking about just for the books line?
Just for the books, yeah. He asked for 33. We gave him 30. I'd like to give him the 33 request. I don't think it's for what the cost of books are and everything, and the amount of usage, like you said, that's going up. I don't think that's an unfair request.
All right, do this straw poll again. Any comments?
I'm a huge supporter of the library, but I think Josh has a good handle on what he needs, and I'm comfortable with the numbers here. And I also know the Great Public Library Association fundraises for a lot of our books and other media. So.
Well, he did request
a very
33.
small amount of those.
Oh,
Mainly programming is for the GPLA.
Oh,
and they
okay.
do have a small collection of books of bestseller, popular stuff that we do keep on the shelf. So it is a couple titles a month, but it is a very minute.
He did request 33.
That true.
But-
Yeah, and we're only giving him 30. That's why I don't think the $3,000 is going to kill us. And I just think this is one of the things that you see a lot of people in the town use. And I don't know. Again, it's one of the things that I would like to increase.
Okay.
So.
Can I just say, that is so incredibly deeply appreciated. And as much money as you want to give me, I'll take. This year specifically with the Main Infinite and Minerva increases, I was trying my hardest to keep as low a budget increase or any swing as possible. The $3,000 is what we actually had for this year as well, because I did move some money around to make way for some furniture needs that we had. So if you're willing to give me the money, great. But certainly if I'm left with 30, I will make everyone just as happy with that. Next year, it may go up again a little bit because stuff keeps going up. But again, one of my main goals as well is to be a very economical and very low-lying hang part of what the town services are while developing the biggest maximum impact I can with the money provided. So if you want to give it to me, I will certainly not say no and put it to good use. But that was kind of my thinking as to why we got back to 30,000 with Mike and I.
All right. Levi.
Yeah, I mean, I try to think of these increases on kind of community benefit, and I think certainly, for that $3,000, it's going to provide a lot of, community benefit. So I'm not opposed to increasing that currently.
So that's a yes. Anne?
Yeah, I go along with that. I especially have been noticing in recent months that after through the pandemic, like every other library in the state and the country, our usage was kind of down for a while, but it's been steadily climbing. So that makes me feel more like an increase is warranted. I have another question when you have a chance, but I don't want to derail this.
Yeah, we'll finish the straw poll and I'll come back to you. Yep. I'll leave it the way it is. I actually would love to see a 0% increase this year with myself, so I'm not really inclined to add any more to the budget than already exists. But It's got 3 votes, so there's a request from the council to add another $3,000 to the library budget for books. Thank you very much. And Ann, you had another follow-up question?
Yeah, this is for Josh. I know in years past we were considering in a corner of the basement creating some sort of television studio or video studio, and I don't think that's in the budget this year, and I haven't heard any discussion of that. I'm just sort of curious what you're thinking about that is these days.
Still very much in favor of it. Again, looking for the right moment in time to align with the rest of the goals of the town on a year-to-year basis when we may need it. I very much believe that, again, it would also accommodate additional capacity for communications department through a production studio is a small dream, but more primarily it would be another meeting space. If we have a meeting more than 10 people, we have one room to accommodate. So that means oftentimes we have people who are bumped out. So my ultimate goal is to take the unfinished space that was left over from the 2013-2014 renovation and make that usable space for the community. It's been talking with Mo Russo, it is a not insignificant but not hugely needed project at the moment. And so right now I'm just as happy to kind of wait for the right time where I feel that there is enough capacity within the overall budget to warrant what we want to do. And in a way, finally put together the last of the renovations and get the last of the things buttoned up that we've been with for 10 years. So still very much alive, still very much my main goal, but again, waiting for the right moment in time. And it just doesn't seem like this is the year for it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I was going to also ask about that, and so I appreciate you waiting until a better economic situation to propose it. But I do want to just put a pin in it for later because I think it's an important
it is not going to die. Trust me.
Expand that space in the basement. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Thank you all
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
And I'll just add, Josh does an outstanding job running the library, as we know, and requires very little of my time to keep that. And I hear nothing but positivity about the library. I did want to mention that we are losing our youth services librarian, who's got a great opportunity to be a library director in another community. And so we may have a pause in some of our children's services offerings just because of the staff makeup that we have. And we'll look to, recruit for that position and hopefully resurrect those offerings. But I have no objection with increasing those, the resources for the library. We were just trying to minimize increases where we could, where we thought we could survive. And so, maybe we'll even come back with an increase higher than that if we feel like it's the right thing to do. So.
Very good, thank you. All right, on to the next item.
So the next item is our recreation budget, and this includes positions included in this are the director for $90,800, the assistant director for $65,600, a new position, which is the recreation lead position of $42,300, and various program staff at about $300,000. We added a merchant services line to recognize appropriate accounting of the merchant services associated with our recreation software that people can register for programs. And then other lines are revised from estimates and will be refined in the future. The programs here are offset by revenues of about $725,000 that we've estimated. And the council will recall, who was here last year, this budget was previously not in the general fund. It was an enterprise fund and only some of the staff. So that's why you can see increases from year to year in the budget. And so that's why there's those reflections that weren't there. Last year, I did an analysis of basically other town resources that, the rec department depends on, finance staff, facilities staff, me, other staff that aren't accounted for, and really why it truly wasn't an enterprise fund. And so a lot of recreation departments in other municipalities are doing this to make sure it's properly reflected in the appropriate budget funds. And then I forget what page this one is.
It's on page 47.
Yeah.
So
Here's
47. So one of the things I wanted to mention to show you, so the recreation lead, as we're calling it, full-time position one, we had part-time staff that were reaching hours that they were working on a regular basis. And we were always finding ourselves to have to lead somebody to lead summer camp and then hire a person to lead the club, kids club, or the after school program, and then hire somebody to lead, vacation camps and things of that nature. So rather than continue to do that, we wanted to get one consistent person that we could support. And so that fund or that position is partially funded by an offset in a reduction of the part-time personnel, because that's less part-time personnel that we'll need to hire. It allows us to comply with the labor laws associated with hours, but gives us a consistent individual that really is a star of that recreation team and can help keep those programs running consistently. So it's a new position, to comment on one of the new positions, but it's not really new because the person existed supporting all these programs as a part-time position, and we just combined as much as we could to support that, rather than continuing to hire a new person every year, and the risk of potentially losing someone because they could go to a job elsewhere making more money.
So
So
that's one of the 3 that you mentioned earlier.
It's new, but it's not really new because
Right.
we were kind of, that's one
Okay.
of the 3.
Questions? Mike?
To go along with it, so really all we're paying for is benefits. That's really the only big new expense.
Yeah,
the
the
benefits.
salary's a little bit more than the part-time wages, but
not
benefits. And
So we have 2 full-time employees. Is that what we're saying?
we'll have 3 now.
There'll actually be 3 for the
We used to have 2.
for the 198. That'll be 3 salaries.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to clarify that. And then, what's the? I don't see. There's revenue from this though as well, right?
Yeah, it's in the revenue budget.
Okay.
In the library and recreation portion of the revenue budget, we get, the library is a small portion of it, but those budgets are historically combined in town budget warrants and things of that nature. So again, like I said, there's a revenue of approximately $750,000. We're still in our transition period where we're evaluating expenses and revenues as part of the new combined operation. So next year will hopefully be a much more refined, both expenses and revenue. And you'll see like some of the changes where, we recognize the merchant fees, we're recognizing special events and supplies and program supplies and all that. We're trying to right size those to reflect what actually happens.
But if I'm correct, this is actually a revenue generator for us.
A significant revenue generator,
Okay.
but it's not 100% offset. So the total budget is that's proposed is $605,000. Again, the analysis I did last year is they're using other staff and town facilities and things like that they don't pay for. So it's not truly what's called an enterprise account.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Anybody that's watching, I want them to, when they look at this and they say, we're putting all this out, but we're not really. We're actually getting the majority of that back.
That and then some.
And this is for our children. This is a big thing for the kids in this town. And I'd love to see more as we can, do more for this town. There's just more needed. And there's certainly, as we watch the news every day, more and more daycares are closing, and what these guys do over here really helps families work, and it is significant in my opinion. So thank you.
Yeah.
Questions? Krista?
I just want to echo what Mike just said about the importance of this department. I think it's an invaluable resource for our town, much like the library and all the services we have here. So thank you for the work they do.
Yeah.
I just had one question on the program supplies line. That has gone down quite a bit from both last year and also what was requested. I'm just wondering why you offered to decrease it.
So we work together, and Anthony can maybe add a little bit, but we work together to put things in the proper places. So the professional services, some of the program supplies were like field trips and things of that nature. So we tried to put them in the right place.
Oh, I see.
And so that's why, so there's some of those shifts. Do you want to better explain that?
Yeah, it's mostly field trips. We'll spend, somewhere around $15,000 on busing and trip tickets for the summer camp this summer. So that's the majority of it. And the other piece is contracting like coaches for, say, pickleball lessons. We didn't really have an accurate place to display that. So that's part of the creation of that professional services line.
Okay, so the decrease in the program supplies actually is reflected in the addition of the professional services line.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
What
you.
do you see for a need, that we don't give? pickleball, is just huge, and we could add probably 10 courts and they'd all be full. If
about
the weather
3?
was right, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what is it that we need to be thinking about? Because, I always want to think 5 years down the road. And, where do you see a need being? Because we want to start, putting money aside for things like recreation.
So we do generate revenue mostly through childcare programs, before and after school programs, summer camp programs. So anything that supports those, I would say infrastructure would be the biggest one. We kind of run at capacity most of the time with the current facilities we use. More partnerships with MSAD 15 could increase that, but that requires, us to work together. And we have worked together, and we do work together on some things. We have a middle school after school program at the middle school. So more partnerships like that in the future are going to save us money and allow us to serve more kids.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I had one other question.
Krista, go ahead.
So in regards to capacity, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we talked about exploring the use of the old lab building. Is that still something we're considering for childcare, or is that,
So we have a lot of projects on our plate as a
Yeah,
whole,
I'm
and we're trying to get caught up. You'll see in the budget that we put together, there's not a lot of projects that require a lot of our staff because we have so many old ones, money set aside for projects that we're trying to catch up on. We did budget last year as part of the capital improvement program some funds for the lab building to upgrade that. One of the projects that's still outstanding is we're still renovating the manual arts building that's next to the gym. So that will provide Anthony and his team some more space to be able to better utilize things. The lab building is something that, in order to try to manage that appropriately without triggering any historical building issues, we need to kind of piecemeal the renovation work on that. So we have some stuff that's happening. Plumbing or basically wastewater was added as part of our new septic. So that's why there's a cut in the ground, as well as appropriate electrical service. So we've made, one big step. So, Mo will work together with us to develop a capital plan that has, addresses the building envelope and maybe finishes the space off. But that'll be something that we'll probably tackle over the next couple of fiscal years.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was still on the radar as a possibility.
There's a significant expense making the building accessible.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, there's a cost-benefit analysis there. I mean,
Sure.
we could fix the building up and we could make it, usable, but is it worth it in the end, given the amount of space the building actually adds to what we can use? So I feel like that's a bigger conversation, but that's certainly for another time.
Sure.
But the finished manual art space will provide some additional space that doesn't exist today.
Right. There's going to be offices and restrooms, and that was funded through the bond that we approved 2 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So my question really quickly, you mentioned a merchant fund. That's the merchant fees line. Is that the same?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're discovering as part of our review and analysis of all our financials is we discovered that in some places that you'll see a similar thing that's happening in the public safety budget line where revenues were being offset by expenses. And that's not appropriate accounting. So so they were offsetting revenues by those merchant fees. And so that's why we've added that line to reflect the merchant fees rather than reducing it from the revenues and having a reduced revenue figure in the budget line. We also had a similar budget line like that I'll explain in more detail for public safety, that you'll see why those lines are added, and I'll explain that.
And what sort of expenses would fall under merchant fees?
So we have a software. We partner with New Gloucester and Recreation, a memorandum of understanding the town established a number of years ago, kind of similar to our partnership with North Yarmouth.
Yep.
Doesn't necessarily directly provide us a revenue, but we work together on everything with facilities and staff. And so we have a software that is for that service, and when people pay for programming, there's a processing fee associated with those programming expenses. And so that's
Okay.
where those are accounted for.
Why wouldn't that be, just out of curiosity, why wouldn't that be in the IT communication budget? Which
Because
is where the
it's just-
software lives, right?
It's not a software expense, it's a merchant fee expense
Okay.
that offsets recreation
It's an
revenue.
additional
It's a
charge.
recreation direct expense.
Yep,
It's-
gotcha.
No other department is benefiting from it.
Gotcha. And then my last question is the enterprise account, which used to be used to pretty much fund this. Is there still such a thing as the enterprise account?
The enterprise account doesn't exist. We transitioning the accounting for that in this fiscal year. So initially we had some links with the software that was recording
Yeah.
it in different accounts, but we simplified the revenue into more simple accounts, and that the enterprise account does not exist in the future.
Just
One of the things that we did do in the executive summary portion of the budget book, where there was a budget, the budget summary, we restated some of those budget lines to include the recreation.
Yep.
So you'll look in the recreation expenses, because I've received some feedback over time. It's like, oh, the budget exploded, when you came here. And I said, well, because we were trying to properly put things in the right place. And so that better reflects an actual budget figure by including the recreation expenses and the recreation revenue in those places. So we have restated that in those budgets, so you can see that to compare it across those fiscal years.
And I think once we have an audit for FY25, that will tie all that out and we'll move on from there. But the enterprise account is, if anybody knows anything about the town budget, is probably that there was an enterprise account. And I think it's just important for people to understand that that's being rolled up.
Yeah, enterprise accounts, just as a brief explanation, are common for operations that are fully funded by user fees. And as I described, recreation isn't. A common example, if we were to establish a wastewater system,
Yep.
that would likely be an enterprise account, because it would at some point be fully funded by user fees and not by the general property taxpayer.
And so fees paid, like when a subdivision is created, that money goes where?
Those are revenue lines in the administrative fees portion of the revenue
Right.
budget.
Is
So-
it still part of what we were calling a sub D account, or how are we accounting for it differently?
I don't have a full understanding of the sub D account. I think
Okay.
that's for like an open space contribution, and that's being handled appropriately. But
Yeah.
when people do a subdivision and they pay the permit fees and the application fees, those are all part of administrative fees that are supported by the planning or the code enforcement and planning department.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do the thing I'm not supposed to do, which is get us off track. So
Okay.
we'll stop that conversation and talk
Sorry.
about it for revenue.
That'll be more reconciled when
Yeah.
everything's.
But it will all tie together when we get past these audits. Just a quick check-in with people. I noticed someone wanted a break. Do we want to take a 5-minute recess? You want to just keep plowing ahead?
I think we don't
We have
have
two
that.
quick ones.
Yeah, I don't think we have
left.
that much left.
Okay, just checking in with folks.
And if the last one has a more lengthy discussion, then we can maybe take a break before that one if you want.
Nope, tally ho, let's go.
So the next one is elections. And I don't have the packet page for that.
It's 41.
41, thank you. I'll get all these for next time, I apologize.
That's right, I'm bookmarking them now. So.
So 41 elections, this just includes election workers, which are as needed, budget is $6,500. And all these lines are revised due to the election cycle. So last year we had a presidential election, which necessitated increases. So we want to right size that budget for the elections that we anticipate in the coming year. You'll see it probably in next fiscal year ramp up a little bit again, because we'll have a gubernatorial election. And then after that, we'll have a presidential primary, which brings in a third election in our election cycles, and then another presidential election. So it's kind of we ride a roller coaster on this budget.
Questions? Just a quick one. It's not a huge amount of money, but I wondered if this would be the appropriate use of a reserve account, where you know that every 4 years you're going to have a bump up in the budget, and we know kind of what that's going to be. I wonder if that would just even it out a little bit. Again, it's not a huge expense.
I never
but-
considered it. That's a great idea. We could try to steady the budget figures.
Yeah, again, it's not a massive number, but anything that evens out the budget over time feels like a plus.
Yeah. we could start in this fiscal year at the end of the budget cycle, whatever's left, transfer that into an election reserve fund, and then next year do the same, and then we could see kind of where we're at and
Yeah.
what we have for available resources, and only ask for what we need and
Yeah.
let you know that we have this much in
Good
a
idea.
reserve account. That's a great idea. I hadn't
Okay.
considered that for that specific budget.
Any questions? On to the next one.
And then the last one is just because we had to shift some of the schedules, we shifted law enforcement to this night. I thought it's really incorporated into public safety, but might necessitate a little bit more discussion. And so the proposed budget includes a sheriff's office contract of 2.8 deputies for a total cost of $418,130. So the increase is 32% to support a new deputy and associated equipment on 1/1/2026. So it's the same strategy that I used in last year's. And this is one of the positions, though it's not really a position because it's a contract service. Councilor Chapel, this was one of the new positions that was identified.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was reading here.
Even though it's not a position, it's an actual contract service. So it's an increase in that. And so this would, like I said, the same strategy I used in other positions where we would start at effective 1/1 to help ease us into it. And this would add one deputy on the off days where we don't currently have a contract deputy. The goal would to maybe in some year get to, so that way we have 2 contract deputies 7 days a week, which we'd still be lower than Standish in the analysis that I provided you, or that the Sheriff's Department provided you, and the data that I provided you. We'd still be lower, but it would just give us the certainty of contract coverage 7 days a week here in the town. And so that, as I mentioned when we were talking about it, the council had straw polled about including it in the budget, and I'm able to include it in the budget, and there's no impact to the tax rate. So if there was a desire amongst the council to eliminate this, we'd have a reduction in this budget, but it'd be my recommendation to offset the reduction with a reduced use of fund balance in the budget, rather than completely offset the reduction to a reduction in net need for property taxes.
Questions?
What page are we on, by the way?
Sorry, we're on page 50.
That's what I thought. I just didn't see what line that was on.
We're on 51 then.
Is it on 51?
Sorry, it continues on.
Yeah, so it's
50.
the
Okay,
last-
township. Okay.
It's the last budget line in the public safety budget.
Yep.
And you can see the history. And the biggest expense associated with the new is the equipment outfit.
Yeah,
And we're
so it's-
gonna establish a reserve fund for that, so that way in future years, last year we had to buy a new cruiser for our current contract.
Yeah.
We can set aside money for that, and then we can even set aside money for, in the future, if we add, then we maybe have money set aside. So that'll be my efforts in the years ahead. But this kind of steps it in and slowly, incrementally better supports law enforcement coverage in the community.
Questions?
What's the term of that contract? Are we yearly basis and reval? Okay.
Yeah, it's an annual basis. So if, as part of next budget, I put in the full position, and the council says, no, we don't want it, we can eliminate that, and they'll typically, absorb that position into the regular Sheriff's Department budget with a vacancy or something of that nature.
And outside of the equipment, once the deputy price stabilizes, is that like in the 100 to 100? What is the number for that?
So the share for the contract itself is about 63,000. So that essentially would double in next fiscal year. It would double plus whatever they have for increases. And so then if we were to do that, go through that cycle, get us into one budget there with that. So it'd take us 2 budgets to get that position fully funded. And then in a future budget, I'd propose, depending on what future budgets looked like, if we could absorb it sooner or whatever. And it'd be my recommendation to just simply get us so we have, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we have a contract deputy in town. And then I'll explore, as I mentioned, potentially working together with some neighboring communities and see if we can share in that resource. But that's one of those things that sometimes it may be harder to do that than we anticipate.
Any questions?
Yeah, I don't want it in the budget. I'll be, I don't think we need it. I've talked to a lot of people over the last week since, just to make sure, to see what they were thinking. Most people want less coverage. They don't want more, which was interesting to me. I'm okay with the coverage we have. We have the state police here. We couldn't get, I know Levi asked for a bunch of numbers last week. We couldn't get them. I know you sent what you had, Mike. I just don't feel there's a need for it. And I'm really concerned that we're going to have some issues this year. And I know you kept the budget down, Mike. I really appreciate that, but I don't have an appetite for this at all.
Okay. Anyone else? Ann?
Yeah, I have a question for Michael. Can you, when we have to buy those vehicles, does the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department or does the state, do they do some sort of bulk purchase of those vehicles? Because it seems, that's a huge cost to take on every several years. And I was sort of wondering if there are ways to reduce that.
Yeah, I think they work on like maybe a state bid or a larger bid that they work off of. So the cost, it's about $112,000 for vehicle and equipment for the officer and training.
Yeah.
So it's like the last year just the vehicle itself was about $72,000 fully outfitted.
That's a lot of money.
Pardon me?
I said, yeah, that's a lot of money. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I understand it's a specialized vehicle. It's not just, it just was like souped up so it's fun for them to drive. But it's a lot of money to take on in addition to those salaries going forward.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what they require of the contract that we share in that. The vehicles, they use them, they have like a 5-year replacement cycle. And when they're replaced, we get the vehicle. I know one of the older ones was repurposed for our animal control officer. And we'll try to, as we haven't received the recent one that's been replaced, but we'll try to repurpose those in places that can be used, that still have life in them. So it's not like we completely lose out on that, but the upfront costs for the position aren't just the vehicle. It's, the other equipment, the firearm, the taser, the training, the uniforms, all that stuff. We participate in those costs to outfit an additional officer.
Anyone else? Krista?
Yeah, I have another question. I mean, one of the things we talked about last week and is the, whether or not the officers or the deputies are the appropriate personnel to send to, especially mental health emergencies. And I know that through other work that I've done in the past that the deputies are able to get training, for how to deal with a mental health emergency. And one of the things that happens is that, are you guys still there?
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. My screen just did something weird. One of the things that happens is that it's hard for them to get to those, the trainings for dealing with mental health situations, because they, towns and county deputies sometimes don't have coverage. So if they're gone for 2 or 3 weeks to get that training, they're not obviously running around the town, and there's not very much coverage at the town level. So I am in favor of going up slightly because I think it provides us some flexibility, but I would not be in favor of going as high as like Standish at this point. But it's really more just maintaining some flexibility and in order to get our deputies the training that they need to handle some of these emergencies that we asked them to do. But I feel like we're moving in toward a situation where we're kind of over policed and not excited about spending a lot more money on it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yep, I had a couple.
Krista?
So the 2.8 full-time positions that you allocated, we currently have 2.3. Is that right?
2.3. So it's adding as a 0.5.
Is adding as a 0.5. And then, so the cost, that makes sense. The cost for the vehicle last year was $72,000, but this year, if we were purchasing it for that new position, it would be quite a bit more. Is that just the increase what is the difference there? Because it's 118,500.
It's the vehicle and equipment
Oh, it's the
for
equipment
for
too.
the new
Okay.
position and training. So it's like
Okay.
the one-time costs and then the annual costs are broken out.
Okay, so
kind of
when the
separately.
vehicle comes back up again in 5 years for whoever's getting their replacement, it would be significantly lower than that 118,500.
Yeah, just like I said last year, I don't know what costs are going to be in that
Sure,
time frame,
right.
but just the vehicle itself was 72 last year. So we would just be replacing a vehicle. After that, the sheriff's department absorbs the costs associated with that officer. So, but it would be my recommendation next year if we're not adding a new position, I'd reduce the equipment side of that budget. Not fully, because then we would put it into a reserve.
Right.
We would continue to set aside funds. And as Councilor Gass said, wouldn't be my recommendation to have as many deputies as Standish.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hope that if the future year that we have vehicle replacements, or if we added another one to have the coverage 24 hours a day, one contract deputy, we could hopefully have funds set aside. So that upfront cost isn't as much, but we're easing into this, and that's why that's the way it is.
Okay. Personally, I'm in favor of continuing to explore this. I mean, if we get to the end of this budgeting process and we really feel like we can't afford this position, we can revisit it. But I think just the statistics we saw from the sheriff last week regarding how our calls line up to a town like Standish, which is similarly sized to us, and they have quite a bit more deputies than us. I think we're just kind of right-sizing somewhat. I agree. I don't think I would like to go up to the 7 deputies that Standish has. It feels excessive. But as Ann mentioned, the increase in mental health calls is really pulling the sheriff's officers away from other things they could be doing, including patrolling around our schools for traffic concerns and here in the village and other just emergency situations that might arise. So I'm comfortable with kind of right-sizing this, at least as we explore the rest of this budget.
Okay. You're all set?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say about it is that I think you want to be careful with anything involving public safety. You don't want to wait until it's too late to address a situation that's already occurred. So I tend to err on the side of, right sizing, I think is the perfect term for that, given the statistics that we saw. So I think I'd also be in favor of keeping it for now to see where it all falls at the end of this.
Okay. Well, that's certainly enough to keep it in the budget. I'll just chime in to say that I would remove this too. We could hire a mental health worker for considerably less money to show up at one of these calls with the deputy just to make sure the situation is safe. One of the things about those statistics is, yes, there were 142 calls in a month, but the sheriff didn't answer my question when I said, but I'm going to bet you money that that's probably not half a dozen people. And he wouldn't confirm a number, but he did imply that we're talking about a very small number of people and that it's a big repeat. I just think that hiring another sheriff to do this work, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Whether we could contract this service out, whether a service could be on call. I mean, I think there are a bunch of different things that we could explore. I do also feel like we have the coverage that we need now. We don't have that many, but we don't have an inordinate number of problems either. We've got enough coverage that sometimes our deputies are called away to other places for mutual aid. So I won't go into it anymore because there's enough support on the council to keep it. But I think we are going to some extent at this point in time in the wrong direction, and we're not exploring some other alternatives that I think would be more beneficial to the community in the long run. But we're going to keep it.
Yes, definitely. If I may just add one thing, I think that the mental health is something, as I mentioned last week, our public safety director, fire chief, Kurt Elkinick, and he can maybe speak to this a little bit more. We've talked about having a mental health liaison because not only do they deal with it and with the law enforcement side, we deal with it on the fire department side for responses. So that's something we can explore to maybe tackle this at a hybrid mechanism of, rather than increasing law enforcement completely, we could potentially add a mental health liaison for the community that can help sort things out and help be a resource for officers as well.
I think it's worth exploring. Again, these calls could come in at 2 a.m. or 9 o'clock at night. So I mean, having an employee here for 4 days a week is kind of like throwing darts at the problem to some
But they can
extent.
follow up and help make sure people have the right resources.
They could follow up, but again, I think if it was more of an on-call situation and a bunch of towns got together, we could create, I guess, enough need to fund an organization or for an existing organization to grow to provide these services, rather necessarily than having an employee at the town. But yeah, I just think it's worth talking about it in all the different venues we have, MMA, GPCOG, at the county level too. And clearly the Sheriff's Department is interested in talking about it from the presentation last week. So that's it.
I just want to make, I agree regionally, but every time we do stuff, they don't have to. You know what I mean? So we're going to add another person, and New Gloucester's going to turn around and say, well, they've got enough coverage over there that they'll just slide over the border when we need them, and they don't have anybody. So I feel like we're funding other towns. I think it's a waste of our money. I have not seen any benefit whatsoever. I have not talked to anybody in this town that has wanted a police department or feels a need for a police department. Someone used the example of, how long it took to get to, an accident. Well, I was in an accident in Portland. It took them 45 minutes to get there, and they have plenty of police officers. So I don't feel we're representing our constituents by doing this. I think it's just,
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Well,
It's a judgment call.
Just to be clear, we're not creating a police department. We're just contracting out with the sheriff's office for additional.
Yeah, this year, and then next year, he wants to add another one, then, so eventually we'll get to the point where it'll be more cost effective just to have our own police department.
Well, that's
So.
where you have to run for election, make
Yeah.
sure that doesn't happen. All right, I think anything else for this one?
That's all we had for this evening.
That's all we have for this evening. Thank you all for coming, and we'll consider the workshop.
Did you want to have public comment?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm embarrassed I didn't think of that myself, but fortunately Krista did. I think we should open it up to public comment if anyone wants to make a comment. We have no one online. We do have one person here. I don't know if you'd like to say anything. You don't have to. There's no requirement.
I guess I am the public tonight. Yeah, Bob Coleman. I guess I should say a few things having sat through it. I appreciate the budget. I think just overall it looks positive, mostly because the bottom line number is in the right direction. I clearly have some things that I'll dig into a little bit more closely, so I'm really not here to comment on anything specific, but I do appreciate the presentation as well. It was very clear and I could understand it and follow most of the items. So I think I'm glad I participated. So
Good.
Hopefully when we get to the end, I'll be a little bit smarter when I complain about stuff. So anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for making a statement. On that note, we'll consider the workshop closed. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's 8:07. That's pretty good.
Bad?
Yeah, it's still the same day we started.
Yeah.
Has that not been the case in the past?
There have been times in the past when that wasn't the case. But we